No, I'm not dying. Merry Christmas 2016. I just wanted to record my life as I see it. I was named after my mother's brother, my uncle, Uncle Tom. He was a pilot in the Second World War. He was on a bombing run on his way to Nuremberg, and they had engine trouble, and they couldn't keep up with their squadron. But the rule of the day is you must go drop your bombs. So by the time they got to Nuremberg, the Germans' anti-aircraft guns were all up and waiting for them, so they got shot up pretty good, so bad in fact that the tail gunner couldn't parachute. So the other three guys parachuted. Uncle Tommy tried to land the plane, and the plane blew up and killed him and the tail gunner. The other three guys ran around Germany for about 3 weeks and then were finally captured and spent the rest of the war in a prisoner of war camp called Stalag 4B. And one of the members of that crew, Ken Reed, went on to become the mayor of Arborg, Manitoba, and he wrote a book called Stalag 4B. And my mother had a signed copy because it was not only about his time in Stalag 4B, it was about all the time leading up to it. So my Uncle Tommy is in the book, and there's a picture of him in the book. So I now have that book. When my daughter wanted to finish up her degree, she wanted to do part of it in another country, and she picked the Czech Republic. So she spent 6 months in Prague, and we went to visit her. And when we went to visit her, we rented a car, and we drove back to Germany to the Allied cemetery where my Uncle Tom was buried, in a little town 20 kilometers south of Munich, right up by the Austrian border, a town called Bad Tolz. And they have a registry there, and they have 2 big books, and there's 6,000 graves there. And we went to find my Uncle Tommy's grave where it was, and somebody had stolen the book. So we looked out, and there's 6,000 graves, and we have to go find my uncle's. So we split up into teams, we each took a third of the cemetery, and we started walking the rows, and my daughter Wendy found it first row. So I went over there and left a Canadian flag on the grave, and that was a very moving event for me. When I was 3, in the spring of 1950, Winnipeg's Red River had the worst flood they'd ever had. Transcona, where I grew up, was the only town that didn't have a river, so we were fine. But everybody had to go down for typhoid shots. And I was quite nervous because I didn't want a needle, but the nurse told me it wouldn't hurt. And if I was a good boy, she'd give me a square off of a Jersey Milk chocolate bar. So I sat down, had the needle. It did hurt, but I did get my chocolate bar square. And that was my first memory on this planet. Growing up in small town Transcona, my 2 sisters and I did simple things for fun while we were growing up. And one of my 2 favorite ones were on Fridays, sometimes Dad would give us money and we'd go down to Gander's store and pick out a soda pop and a chocolate bar. Put it all in one bag, bring it home, sit in the living room, pull out the bag, open it up, and Susan and I would eat our chocolate bars and drink our drink, and Janie would drink her drink and put her chocolate bar away. And then she'd bring it out the next day and eat it in front of us. That was her fun. The other thing we liked to do, we were in a small town, we had one little theater. And we'd get to go to Saturday afternoon matinees. They were fun. For 25 cents, you got into the show, you got your drink, you got your popcorn. Didn't get any better than that. Yeah, I had the usual chores, cutting the grass and shoveling snow, but 2 memories that I have that I'd like to share. One was, I don't know what I did wrong because I did so many things wrong. I did get a lot of punishment when I was a child. And this one time my dad said to me, I want you to take this big pile of wood that he'd got from the scrap pile at the CNR, and 1 inch by 6 inch planks, and I want you to cut them into 1 foot lengths. My dad had a potbelly stove in his garage, which was his workshop. So my dad went off to work, and I started into this pile, and after about an hour, my arms were quite tired already. I'd already used both arms, and I thought there's got to be a simpler way. And then I remembered that my dad had a table saw. So here I was, 8 years old, I fired up the table saw, and I had all the wood cut in like an hour. And Dad came home for lunch, and when he saw that it was all done, I don't know what extra punishment I got, but I know it probably wasn't a good one. The other thing I remember is shoveling snow. We used to get a lot of snow in Transcona in those days, and our neighbor's house was side by side, and there was a driveway in between. But there was no room to put the snow there, so you either had to push the snow to the back of the house or to the front of the house. And by January, the piles were so high that you had to get up and shovel the tops of the piles. So we got this big dump, and there must have been 3 feet of snow on the driveway. So first of all, we had to shovel off the top, and then we could start on the driveway. And my dad said, I'll give you 50 cents each, you and Terry, your friend. I'll give you 50 cents each if you guys shovel the driveway. Well, we went out there and we shoveled for hours. And we were making not much headway. And then I look, and who's come to help but Mom? Mom always had my back. So Mom helped us finish it. She never told my dad, and we got our 50 cents. I was a very dedicated track and field athlete. As a matter of fact, in grade 12, I won the award for the Male Track Athlete of the Year. I still have my trophy in my office, actually. And that same year, I won the provincial high jump championship. So after I failed grade 12, my dad said that you can tuck those trophies underneath your arm and go get a job, as opposed to repeating grade 12. So where would I go to get a job? Well, we lived right across the street from the C&R repair shop, so that's where I went. That's where everybody went. So I've been out of school for about a year, and a good friend of mine, Ken Thompson, was a miler, a good runner. And we used to have this big track meet every year at the Winnipeg Arena called the Red River Relays. So I went to watch him run the mile. And while I was there, I ran into a friend of mine, Ken Friesen, and he was going to be in the high jump. And he said, I've sprained my ankle, I can't jump, do you want to jump for me? I said, sure. I hadn't trained in a year, but I'd give it a go. I said, I don't have any gear. He says, well, you can have my shorts. I said, okay, they're a little big, but they'll work. And you can have my shoes. Well, he's size 13, I'm 10, so that didn't work. So Ken says, I'll give you mine, but I'll need them back when I need to run. And I said, okay. So I go down on the floor, and they're starting the high jump. And I keep forgetting that my name is Ken Friesen. My name is not Tom Smith. And they'd call Ken Friesen, and I'd be sitting there. And if they call your name 3 times and you don't answer, then you're disqualified. I did avoid being disqualified. And we were doing quite well, and we were down to 4 people left. Me and 2 other guys, and Orton Harrison. And Orton Harrison was the best high jumper in the province. He was a guy that I never, ever had beaten. So I thought maybe tonight was the night that I would beat Orton Harrison. So we get down to 4, and Ken comes over and says to me, I need my shoes back. I got to go run the mile. So here I am in the final 4, and I've got no shoes. So I'm going to run in my bare feet. I'm going to jump in my bare feet. So away I go, lift my leg up in the air to try to jump, and my other foot slides out, and I go right into the bar between my legs. It hurt like crazy. The next thing I know, there's 2 St. John's ambulance men there giving me some help and dragging me away. And I finally got it back together, and they said, did you want to jump again? And I said, I'll try, but I did a run, and I just couldn't. So yes, I finished 4th. I only had 1 pet of my own. I had a dog. My friend Terry had a Dalmatian, and that Dalmatian had a litter with a black lab. So I pleaded for one of these puppies. So they let me have one of these puppies. And at the time, my mom's friend and her husband and their son, Billy, were living with us. He was in construction building the new city hall. And so my dad decided that we should have a naming contest, which I didn't think was fair because it was my dog. So he said, we'll put all the names in a hat, and then we'll draw one out, and that'll be the name of the dog. Well, my mom's friend's family, they wanted to name the dog Yoicks, because they had had a dog named Yoicks. And everybody in my family wanted to name the dog Patty. Well, I just finished reading a book called Tinker the Sheepdog, and I wanted to name the dog Tinker. So I put the name in the hat. My dad mixed all the names up, and he let me pull out the one name. Well, lucky for me, it was Tinker. Now, I don't know, because my dad did have a very warped sense of humor. They might have all been Tinker names in the hat. I never did find out. I met Stephanie January 20th, 1967 at a dance at the University of Manitoba. My friend Dave DeVell was going, and he was meeting his girlfriend there, and she was bringing 2 girlfriends, so she told him to bring 2 friends of his. So I went, and so did my other friend, Dave Embry. We both went, and we saw these 2 women, Stephanie and her friend Bev, and although we didn't admit it publicly, we both fancied Stephanie, and fortunately I won out, and we started dating, and that was January. We dated till April. In April, I got transferred to Saskatoon with the CNR, but I had a rail pass, so I'd come back every month. And when summertime hit, we were building our family cottage down at the Lake of the Woods, and they invited Stephanie to come down and if you want to spend the weekend and help build this cottage. Well, Stephanie just moved to Winnipeg 6 months before from Kamloops, so she didn't know a lot of people, so she took advantage of the opportunity and she went down, and then it became a weekly thing. And then when I came back to Winnipeg after 13 months, we had to get married. No, she wasn't pregnant. If I didn't marry Stephanie, I think I would have been thrown out of the family. By then, she was a part of our family. My parents taught me about family, that family is first. It took me a long time to get it, but I've got it now, and I'm trying to teach my kids the same thing. Family first. We need a hand. Who's there? Family, of course. Hanging on to Stephanie for 44 years of marriage and counting is at the top of my accomplishments. And also, I'm very proud of both my kids. Career-wise, I would have to say it would be my career at Goodall Rubber. I was working at the CNR, and midnight shift as a carman, inspector in the yards. And a friend of mine was working part-time at a company called Goodall Rubber in the warehouse during the day. And they asked me if I would like to do that as well. I didn't really want another job, but it was cash money, so I took it. I did that for about 3 months, and then they offered me a full-time job. And at the time, I've been thinking about the railway wasn't for me, and I was looking for some way to get into sales, and this was the way. So they offered me a job as operations manager / inside sales, a very small branch. So I talked it over with Stephanie, and it was half the pay I was making at the railroad, but we didn't have our kids yet. Stephanie was doing well at CIBC, so I took the job. And about a year and a half later, I got promoted into sales, and then I did that for a few years, and then I got promoted to branch manager. And then one day my boss called from Chicago and said, "How would you like to go to Kansas City?" I said, "As what?" He said, "As branch manager." So up we went, pregnant Stephanie and 4-year-old Stephen, and we moved to Kansas City. And I ran Kansas City, St. Louis, Oklahoma City, and Memphis for a while. And then I got promoted to region manager, and that threw in Denver and Minneapolis and Chicago. And then I got a chance to come back to Canada as region manager for all of Canada, and they wanted me to go to Toronto. But Stephanie says, "Let's go to Vancouver if we can. That's closer to my home." So I held out for Vancouver, so we got to move to Vancouver. And then the company sold. It was a family-owned company, and it got bought by Trelleborg Corporation. And they came in and realigned everything, and I went to a meeting, and Stephanie thought I was going to get fired. I came back from the meeting, and I was president of the Canadian company, so now I had 12 branches and a factory with 100 employees in Collingwood, Ontario. And that was a 20-year career there until they made a major acquisition, and I was a little guy, and I was out, and the big guys were in. So they gave me an opportunity to do something else. I said, nobody's going to do that to me again. So I started my sales agency, and now we're 22 years strong. Stephanie's been in it for 20 of those years, and Stephen's been in it for 12. My parents were childhood sweethearts, right from high school. My dad went to Transcona, and my mother went to Elmwood. When the war broke out, my dad enlisted in the RCAF. He wanted to be a pilot, but he was colorblind, so that wasn't going to happen. So he was going to become an airplane mechanic. So he got stationed in Trenton, Ontario, and my mother wanted to be closer to him, so she moved to Toronto, and she worked in a munitions factory. And they had a fight and broke up, and Dad was off to war. And then Mom met a fellow by the name of Thomas Earl Bagley, and they had a quickie marriage because he was going to be off to war soon, too. So they got married, and off he went to war. And then while he was away, she met another fellow by the name of Malcolm Bird. And they moved in together. They passed themselves off as married because that's what you did in those days. And then after the war, Lloyd came back. They got a divorce. 2 years after that, then I came along. And then when I was about 2, Mom had had enough of Mac. He was pretty wild, so I'm told. And she decided that she was going back to Winnipeg. So we got on the train, we came back to Winnipeg. When she got back to Winnipeg, she looked up Jack's sister, Auntie Grace, and said, what's Jack up to? And Jack had never married. So Auntie Grace says, I'll babysit little Tommy, and you guys go for a picnic and talk about what you're going to do. So Mom and Dad went on this picnic, and Mom told Dad that I've got this little 2-year-old now, and Dad says, well, then we better get married. So they got married, and the next August they had Janie, and then the next December after that they had Susan, and they passed us off as one big happy family. My first job other than a paper route was hoeing sugar beets in Manitoba gumbo. That was work. 75 cents a row from 6 in the morning till 6 at night for 2 weeks. My friend Brian and I made $27.50. We went that weekend and we blew it all at the Red River exhibition. We got married in a snowstorm in November 6th, 1971. And we went on our honeymoon. We were going to California, and I said to Stephanie, we're going to drive till there's no more snow. So the first day we made it to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and then eventually we got to Los Angeles. So this story is about Los Angeles. We were staying at the Disneyland Hotel, and we wanted to go down and see the action down on Sunset Strip. So we drove down to Sunset Strip. We hit a few of the bars like Whiskey A Go-Go. We had a really good time. And now we're back on the freeway coming back to the Disneyland Hotel. And Stephanie says, I have to go to the bathroom. I said, well, you're going to have to hold it. Because if I get off this freeway, we'll never get back on. I only know how to get from A to B and B to A, that's it. She says, I got to go really bad. I said, well, I'm sorry, I'm not getting off the freeway. So she starts looking around in the car to find something that she can pee into. She finds a dry cleaning bag. She ties a knot in one end, spreads it on the floor in the passenger seat, squats down, does her business. I'm disgusted with my new bride. I said, throw that thing out the window. She picks it up by the knotted end and starts to throw it out the window, and all the pee spills all over the floor of the car. So a very quiet ride back after that. We get back to the Disneyland Hotel. I'm walking, stomping basically, up to my room carrying a wet floor mat to wash it off. And we get back after our honeymoon, and I'm telling my mother this story, and my mother says, welcome to the family, Stephanie. It sounds like something I would do. My first date with Stephanie. I said, where can I take this girl to impress her? So I thought I'd take her to the show, and I thought I'd take her to a show that she would like, which was Gone with the Wind. So we go to see Gone with the Wind, which is an epic, very long movie. So when it's over, I get up to leave, and Stephanie says, it's not over, this is just intermission. I guess I wasn't paying much attention to the plot. Stephanie is the most beautiful woman I have ever met. I still find it hard to believe that she would actually marry me. She should have been a lawyer. She's our kids' lawyer. If anybody says anything unkind about our kids, boy, she's got their back. Me, not so much. I was climbing the corporate ladder when our kids were little, and I wasn't around that much, probably gone half the time. That's one of my biggest regrets, that I never got to experience everything with my kids growing up. Stephanie did. She got to experience it all. She's an awesome mom. And now that I'm getting to sort of do it again with the grandkids, every time I say to Stephanie that one of our grandkids did something brilliant, she said, our kids did the same thing, you just weren't here to see it. Stephanie is a very inward person. You really have to know her to get her to open up a little bit. Very caring. She makes a great friend, but it does take a while. Very much like my sister Sue. They have a saying, they don't like people that they haven't met. When I moved to Vancouver, I wanted to meet people. I didn't know anybody, and I wanted to give back to my community, so I joined Rotary. I didn't really know what I joined at the time. I didn't know that it would become a way of life, and I've made my bestest of friends through Rotary. Every day, a little bit of Rotary touches me, and I get to feel good every day. When I was in Winnipeg, I belonged to Big Brothers, and I had a little brother. I had Craig for 7 years, and one of my proudest moments was when I was voted Big Brother of the Year. That was a pretty special moment for me. And even a more special moment is when my Rotary Club named me as Rotarian of the Year. There is no greater honor than to be honored by your peers. My mother had told me when I was younger that she had been married before, but I didn't do anything with that information until I lost my job and I had lots of time on my hands, started thinking about things. I had been going to Toronto once a month on business, and she had told me that she was married to a Lloyd Earl Bagley. So I looked it up on the phone book, and there was one. So I wrote down the phone number, and I put it in my wallet, and I came home, and I called my sister Jane, and I told her that I think I found my dad. So she told Mom that I was going to call this guy when I felt the timing was right, and she says, well, don't call him. He's not your dad. I said, okay, if he's not my dad, who's my dad? So then she told me that it was a Mac Bird or a Malcolm Bird, and that she thought he had a son. And that was about all she would tell me. And every time I tried to pump her for more information after that, she'd make sure Dad was around so that I wouldn't bring it up. Well, there are actually two brothers. And a little bit of history on them. When they were 5 and 3, Mac and their mother split up. And neither parent took the boys. Bob got to go to one set of grandparents who were quite well off. And Bill got to go to the other set of grandparents that were not well off at all. Poor Bill bounced around from them to foster home, and then eventually just enlisted in the Army when he was 16. So all three of us were raised independent of each other, but when we get together, you'd never know it. I lost my job in 1993 and had lots of time on my hands, and I started thinking about this family that's out there, but the other half of me. And I decided to go looking for them. I didn't have much in the way of facts. I knew his name was Malcolm Bird. I thought he might have had one son, and my birth certificate said I was born in Cobourg, Ontario. So I went down to the library, because this was pre-internet, and I found the phone books for Cobourg, Ontario, and the next town north, which is Port Hope, and the next town south, which is Belleville. And I looked up how many birds were in there, and there was 23 bird families. So I wrote a letter to these 23 bird families and just signed it like I was a friend of the family trying to reconnect, because I didn't know who knew what about what, and I didn't want to start anything. So I mailed the letters off. A week later, the phone rang on a Friday. The voice at the other end said, Tommy, is that you? You're Mac's son, aren't you? And I said, yes, I think I am. And that was Uncle Clarence, Mac's brother. And Mac had died 4 years previous. And Mac said, you've got two brothers. Or sorry, Clarence said, you've got two brothers. And you should be very proud of both of them. Come out and see us. A little bit later in the evening, the phone rang again, and it was Brother Bill. Brother Bill said, your old man was not much of a man. He sold my daughter's ducks. He quartered cows 5 ways. Very, very bitter. I got off the phone and wondered, okay, I've opened Pandora's box. What have I done now? The next morning, the phone rings again, and it's Brother Bob. And he says, don't worry about Bill. He's had a rough upbringing. He's bitter. We'd love to see you. I lived with you for a year when Mac took me in for 1 year when your mother was there. Your mother was the only mother I ever had. I want to reconnect with you. Come out and see us. So I get off the phone, and I'm thinking, boy, oh boy, do I go, do I not go? Stephanie says, you got to go. You can't just start this thing and not follow it through. I said, well, I don't know. So I had to go to Edmonton for a week on business, and when I thought about it, I came back and I said, Stephanie, I've made a decision. And she said, so have I. I said, okay, you go first. She says, I'm comfortable with whatever decision you make, I'm comfortable with it. It's up to you. So I said, well, I have made a decision. I want to go. So we went to Toronto, and Bob and his lovely wife Lois met us at the airport, and we looked at each other, and we went, oh my God, no DNA required. It was like the missing link for me. We went and had dinner with them, and then in the Skyview Hotel by the airport, and then we were going to drive to Picton, where he lives, and he said, there's a few people that want to meet you, and they're in the bar. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be on 60 Minutes. So we walk into the bar, and there was two of my cousins there. So I got to meet two cousins and a new brother all on the same day. And then for the next week, we got shown so many relatives, and they've been in that area since the 1840s. They're original United Empire loyalists, and I felt I was connected. We've had great bro trips, and we've had great couples trips. I even made a list of all the places where the brothers and I have been with each other. It goes like this: from Paris to Montreal, to Ottawa, to Cancun, to Cabo San Lucas, to Puerto Vallarta, to Yellowknife, to New York City, to Deadwood, South Dakota, to Winnipeg, to Niagara Falls, and I probably missed a couple. We've had great trips. I grew up as the oldest of three with two younger sisters. So when you're the oldest, you know everything. Then when I found my two brothers, I was the youngest of three. So I knew nothing, and they knew everything. Now the two families are together. I'm a middle child, just like Stephanie. She's a middle child with her five. I'm proud of both my sisters. My sister Sue raised both her boys as a single mother. She dedicated her life to raising those boys, and they've both been very successful in business. And Lyle has given her two wonderful grandchildren, Scanlon the soccer player, and Waverly the figure skater. Janie is marvelous. Janie is amazing. Her marriage was blowing up. Her business was failing. Her daughter was off the rails. She just picked up and she moved with nothing to London. London, England. Reestablished herself, got a couple of good jobs, found a new husband, a Spaniard, Pedro, and she's been very, very successful, loves it over there. Her two kids, Robbie's very successful, runs a construction company, Barb, and Barb's husband, Sean, works with Robbie. They got two beautiful children, Ryder and Jackson. Janie's very proud of her two grandkids too, so I'm very proud of both my sisters. Yeah, my dad was in the Second World War. He was in the RCAF. He wanted to be a pilot, but he was colorblind. So he ended up being trained in Trenton, Ontario as a aircraft mechanic. And he didn't talk about it very much, but the one story that stuck with me was when he was in a camp very close to enemy lines, and they got raided by the Germans. And there was gunfire everywhere and shrapnel everywhere. And my dad looked for cover somewhere, and the only place he could find cover, he jumped into the slit trench. And the German pilot came very low, and they locked eyes. And the pilot didn't shoot. And he wasn't sure whether the pilot was out of bullets, or you just, because they locked eyes, you can't kill somebody when you're looking at him. He didn't know, but he was happy that he never shot. Then the raid was over, and everybody started coming out of where they were hiding. And my dad got out of the slit trench, and everybody was staring at him, and he didn't know why they were staring at him. And it turned out that his pants were red with his own blood. He was shot up. He was shrapnel everywhere, all through his legs. So they take you to triage, and when you go to triage, you either go, you're going to make it, or you're not going to make it. There's two definite camps there. And they put him in, you're not going to make it camp, because the you're going to make it camp was full, but he didn't know that. So he thought he was going to die. But he did recover. He came back. And I can remember as a little boy, every once in a while, he'd pull out his penknife and pick a piece of shrapnel out of his leg. It was, lots of it still in there. And every once in a while, it would come to the surface. My mother was my biggest fan. My mother looked after me, boy oh boy, even though I was a little brat growing up. I can remember times when my dad would send me to my room with no dinner. And Mom would wait till Dad went to bed, and she'd sneak me up dinner. That was a good mom. My mom used to take me to all my track meets. Lots of times she was the only parent there. But she was so proud of me and my track and fields. And I miss my mom. I miss her every day. When Stephanie and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary in 1996, we were already living in Vancouver, but Susan wanted to hold a party for us in Winnipeg with all our high school friends. So she had a party for us, and I just discovered my brother Bob 2 years before, and he wanted to come to Winnipeg. It was quite funny at the party because nobody knew who Bob was, and people would say, "Who's he?" And I'd say, "He's my brother." And they would all laugh because they knew I didn't have a brother growing up, and they all know that I'm a jokester anyway. So it took some convincing to convince them that I actually did have a brother now. So we took the opportunity to set up a lunch with brother Bob and my mom. And keeping in mind that when Bob was 12, my mother lived with him and me as a baby, and Mac. And that's the only mother he ever knew, because his other mother gave him up when he was 5, and she died when she was young. And he always spoke fondly of my mother. So we lined up a luncheon. He hadn't seen my mother in 47 years. And we took them to a nice restaurant in Winnipeg. He bought her a dozen roses, and we all cried happy tears. It was a wonderful day. Without my family, my life would be meaningless. I love my family. I love Stephanie. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever met. She still has that same twinkle in her eyes that she had when I met her. I'm proud of both my kids. Stephen, a successful businessman running the company that I started. He's so much more insightful, a lot better businessman than I've ever been. I'm so proud of Wendy. It took her a long time to find her calling, but she found it, and she's a teacher, and she's good at it. I'm so proud of her. And I love my 2 grandkids. They are special. I'm so proud of you, Stephanie. There is no better wife, lover, mother, nana, or friend on the planet. You are my voice of doom. I mean reason. Without you, I wouldn't have amounted to anything. I would be broke for sure. Thank you for sharing your life with me. I love you. My life has been very full of love to my family and full of love from my family. I've got great friends all over the place, friends I don't see very often, but when I do, it's just like time stood still and we just pick up where we left off and have our laughs together. I like being busy between my family and Tasco and Rotary and sports. I like being busy. To me, life is all about fun with the odd stressor.